Welcome to Baby Talk 360. We have the owner of Legalwills.ca. His name is Tim Hewson. Tim, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Alan?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much, sir. So on today's show, it is the family planning show. And what better thing to talk about, even though it could be kind of a downer, but let's talk a little bit about Legal Wills, and let's talk about the service you offer and how important it is to make sure that you have everything in place if, God forbid, something should happen.
Yeah, so I'd like to start with that first misconception, that writing a will is a downer. We're trying to convey the idea that writing a will is just a part of intelligent financial planning. It doesn't mean that you're imminently going to pass away. You can write a will, you update it regularly throughout your life, and it's just one of the key documents that everybody should have. It's something that you update every time there's a change in your circumstances, but it needs to be there. It needs to be in place. And the reason being, there's two key things, at least, that a will does. First of all, it describes what's going to happen to all of your things when you pass away and how you want them to be distributed. And secondly, you can name a guardian for your children in your will. So for those, particularly for new parents, it's those two key elements that mean everybody should have a will in place.
Okay, fair enough. Just busting me up there at the beginning. That's cool.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I get it all the time at home. So the one thing that I really want to get off here and ask you is that obviously we know the importance of having a will. And your website and your service offers tons of things. You do the whole 360 approach, which I really, really love. But let's talk about what happens if someone passes and they don't have a will.
So first of all, the courts decide how your things are going to be distributed. So every province in Canada, every jurisdiction has it written down clearly how an estate would be distributed. But the issue is, to start with, you're not going to have named a person called an executor. And this person is the person who takes the responsibility for distributing all of your things. So to start with, your family members, your friends and family members, are all going to have to decide what they're going to do, how they're going to sort out the things that you have. They're then going to go to the courts, and you're going to end up with a bit of a mess if you don't have a will in place. And the end result is that the courts decide who's going to get everything, and it may not be the way you want things to be distributed. And also, the courts are ultimately going to have to make a decision around guardians for children. And what's likely to happen is you're going to get a few different friends or family members all appeal to the courts to take that guardianship on, and then the courts are going to, a judge will sit there and decide who, in their mind, is the most fit person to be the guardians for your children.
Wow. Okay, so walk me through the process here. If someone goes on to legalwills.ca and they go on the site and they want to put together a will to make sure that if something were to happen, that their wishes would be for their children would be put in place. So let's start that off right off the bat. Give me the process from the person signing up, what they have to go through.
So our service is interactive software that it will basically ask you a series of questions: your family status, whether you have children, the kinds of things you want to do with your estate, name an executor, name a guardian. You step through a series of questions, kind of like using tax preparation software to file your taxes, but this is a series of questions to prepare your will. Once you've completed that, the service generates a personalized, customized document based on your jurisdiction where you're living and based on your family situation, and then you simply download and print that document in your own home, and you sign it in the presence of two witnesses. And once it's signed in the presence of two witnesses, then that becomes your legal will.
So what would be the difference of that or going to a lawyer? Because it seems very convenient doing it this way.
It's definitely convenient. The difference is that you're really creating your own will. So everybody has a right to prepare their own will. There's no requirement by law to use a lawyer, but a lawyer will give you legal advice. So if you feel that you have a situation and you might need legal advice for your situation, and there's a number, you may have a child with special special needs, or you may have children from multiple marriages. You may want to disinherit somebody. In situations like that, you might want to go and see a lawyer and get legal advice. If you have a pretty good idea what you want to do with your things, your family situation is straightforward, then you have every right to prepare your own will. So this service is basically giving you the tools to do that. So the difference is we're not giving you legal advice, you're writing your own will using our service.
Okay, so once someone does the will on your end, using your software, how often can they go and update and change things?
So that's another great advantage of using interactive software like us. You can update it whenever there's a change in your circumstances. And that change in the circumstances may not necessarily be you, whether you're getting married or having a child or whether you come into a fortune, but it may be a change of circumstances to your beneficiaries or your executor or the people you've chosen to be guardians. So you may have, for example, named somebody to be a guardian of your children. They may have triplets of their own in 6 months' time. They may not be the most appropriate person. So using our software, you create an account for yourself, you can log in at any time, make the update, and every time you make an update, you print off a new will, destroy your old one, and sign and witness your new one.
Okay, so it's important. Every time you make a change, you always have to have those two witnesses.
Yes, and that's another important point, is if you have a will, never just write a comment on it or put a line through something. Never make any manual edits. It's best to just write a new will, print it off, and you have a pristine new copy of your will.
Now, where would you usually keep a will like this?
So this is ultimately a personal decision. The most important thing is you're going to name somebody as the executor within the will, and that's the person that you're given the responsibility to follow out the instructions. That person has to know where the will is and has to be able to find it at the appropriate time. And that is probably one of the biggest problems with creating a will in Canada is often people have created it, nobody knows where it is. So you can store it somewhere safe at home, you can store it with a bank, you can even give a copy to your executor so they'll have it on hand. There's pros and cons to each, but the most important thing is at the appropriate time your executor is going to be able to have that will in hand so that they can then go to the courts and start to administer your estate.
Now, can a parent, can they leave property or assets to a young child in their will as well?
So you can certainly kind of yes and no. You can leave assets to a child, but a child can't really receive those assets. It has to be held in trust. So using a service like ours, you can create a trust for a minor, and that trust is going to be administered by a person that you name within the will. So the child can't suddenly have $1 million at 12 years old. But what they can do is you can leave them a sum of money, and then you can determine at what age you feel that they would be mature enough to receive that money. You can say, I want them to have a third at 20 years old, a third at 25 years old, and then the final piece at 28 years old or something like that. So you can determine, based on the individual child, when you think would be a suitable age for them to actually inherit this sum or the property.
Now, what would your advice be for new parents, in terms of putting together a guardianship will or the wills that you offer, in terms of picking a guardian, things of that nature? What would your advice be to them?
The most important piece of advice is to speak with everybody that you're naming within the will. So don't name a personal guardian without that person not knowing that they're on the hook. And also potentially talk to the people who aren't included as well. So there may be somebody who expects to be the guardian of your children, and for whatever reason, they may not live close to you. They may not. You may want to keep the children within the family. They have the same spiritual beliefs or financial means. There's a number of subtle and nuanced reasons for selecting the right person. So you want to talk to the person that you have chosen and speak to the people perhaps that you haven't chosen and explain to them why you've made the decision that you've made. And the same applies to the executor of the will and also beneficiaries within the will. It's a good idea to let people know what's going going on in there and why you've made the decisions that you've made.
Now, I want to make a point to all of our viewers out there that your service is available all over the world, or pretty much anywhere in North America. I would imagine the U.S., Canada. They can just log on to Legalwills.ca and they'll be prompted to decide which country they're in and whatnot.
That's right. So you can create a legal will, which is legal within Canada, all the provinces within Canada, with the exception of Quebec. You can create a legal will for all of the U.S. and the U.K., but you can actually write it from anywhere. So if you happen to be abroad, you could be. We had somebody just the other day who was in Mexico at the time writing their Canadian legal will. So you can certainly do that. And one of the very common situations is people, when they're about to go on a trip, they're about to travel, they need a will in a hurry, they can use a service like ours, and you can have a will in your hand in 30 minutes. But certainly you can update it from anywhere in the world, and you can write it from anywhere in the world, as long as you have an internet access.
And who wouldn't want to update their will or make a will just before going to Mexico? So let me ask you, last but not least, what is the ultimate benefit for people using Legalwills.ca and a company like yours?
A company like ours, we've been in business, we've been doing this for 11 years now. So we've created, or helped create, thousands, tens of thousands of wills for Canadians. We've never really had an issue. We've never heard of an issue of one of our wills having a problem going through the probate process. We've had a lot of feedback from loved ones who have been left behind and dealing with one of our wills who have gone through without any issues. And the most important thing is what you're leaving your loved ones is a will that's going to be able to go through the administration process without any hitches. So we have a solid track record of allowing people to do that. And the most important advantage of using a service like ours, other than the price and the convenience, is the ability to update it, and you can read through the service as you work through it, and you'll understand your will. And I think we have a lot of online help to guide people through the process, and you really understand all of the decisions that have to be made and why you might be making them, and it'll guide you through the process so you really know what you've got at the end of it.
Great. So for more information, anybody can visit you at www.legalwills.ca for all the information, all the services that you offer, because you offer for everything under the sun.
We do. We have what we call the complete estate plan. So we have a last will and testament, a living will, financial power of attorney, and we even have services that allow you to specify funeral wishes, and you can even write messages that get delivered once you're passed away and things like that. So there's a lot of different services that are available there.
Oh, I love the messages one. I'm going to fill that one up with people I don't like.
There's different ways of looking at that service, and one of the most important things is you can actually just say in one of the messages, by the way, my will is in my bedside table. So it doesn't have to be a sinister message. It can be actually just be a useful message to let people know where all of your important documents are, and it doesn't have to be what you really thought of somebody.
Amazing. Tim, thank you so much for joining the show. This is actually, I believe this is probably one of the best benefits and the best things that we're talking about. And as a new parent, this is an absolute must, and I totally recommend Legalwills.ca. This is an absolute must for any new parent or just for any person in general.